somebody else want to sing? Well, I can't. Otherwise, I would do it. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotra Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotra Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Guru Parampara Ki Jai. Sad Goswami Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Gauda Premanandi. Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga.
Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtapraishwa Bhadresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishne Swadhamo Pagate Dharmajnanadibhisaha Kalau Nashtadrishamesha Puranarko Dhunodita. This is Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4, Chapter 20, and today we'll be doing texts 17 through 22. Did I read text 16 yesterday? I don't remember. It was blowing through those verses like the breeze. Okay, so then I'm just going to read the translation to text 16 and some of the salient points of the purport. Really, it's not for us to decide what's important and what isn't, but I kind of have to do that. My dear King, I am very captivated by your elevated qualities and excellent behavior, and thus I am very favorably inclined toward you. You may therefore ask from me any benediction you like. One who does not possess elevated qualities and behavior cannot possibly achieve my favor simply by performance of sacrifices, severe austerities, or mystic yoga. But I always remain equipoised in the heart of one who is also equipoised in all circumstances. In his purport, Srila Prabhupada says, the Lord Vishnu is very pleased with Maharaj Prithu's good character and behavior and offered him a benediction. The Lord openly says that performing great sacrifices or undergoing the austerities of mystic yoga practice cannot satisfy him. He is pleased only by elevated character and behavior. But these cannot develop unless one becomes a pure devotee of the Lord. Anyone who has developed unalloyed, unflinching devotional service unto the Lord develops his original good qualities as spirit soul. The spirit soul, as part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is all the good qualities of the Lord. When the spirit soul is contaminated by the material modes of nature, one is considered good or bad with reference to the material qualities. But when one is transcendental to all material qualities, all the good qualities come out. These qualities of the devotee, 26 in number, are listed as follows. 1, kind to everyone. 2, does not quarrel with anyone. 3, fixed in the absolute truth. 4, equal to everyone. 5, faultless. 6, charitable. 7, mild. 8, clean. 9, simple. 10, benevolent. 11, peaceful. 12, completely attached to Krishna. 13, has no material hankering. 14, meek. 15, steady. 16, self-controlled. 17, does not eat more than required. 18, sane. 19, respectful. 20, humble. 21, grave. 22, compassionate. 23, friendly. 24, poetic. 25, expert. 26, silent. The Lord is satisfied by development of the transcendental qualities of the living entity, and not by artificial performance of sacrifices in mystic yoga. In other words, unless one is fully qualified to become a pure devotee of the Lord, one cannot expect to be liberated from material entanglement. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kalamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Utaparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalata Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustate Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavranda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Humbly I seek all of your blessings that I may say something worthwhile for anyone. Madgavirapi Gopala Swikuryat Kripaya Yadi Tadaivasam Payahapitva Hrishayus Tat Priyajanaha. We see many examples in the Bhagavatam of devotees who have gained the Lord's mercy, and it appears in many cases that they attain the Lord's mercy by exhibiting the kind of good qualities that are mentioned in this verse and purport. What are some examples? Prachetas? Anything else? Anyone else? Vasudev? He kept his promise, just like Bali Maharaj also kept his promise, even though it was a very difficult promise to keep. Any parents here? Raise your hands. Parents. So, what if you're asked to surrender your firstborn son to someone that you know is going to kill him, just because you promised to do so? Would you do it? No, you wouldn't. That is a fact. But that's what Vasudev did. When we talk about humility, Brihad Bhagavatamritam says, prema means absolute, unconditional, unqualified humility, and that's beyond our comprehension. For the most part, we can't even conceive of that. But that's what it takes to do this kind of thing. And these pure devotees, we see that they exhibit this kind of behavior. On the basis of this kind of surrender, actually, is what it is. And love for Krishna, because what can possibly motivate you to surrender unless you love someone? And on the basis of that surrender and pure love of Godhead, they exhibited all these wonderful qualities. The Lord says it is on the basis of these qualities that the Lord loves and reciprocates with his pure devotees. But it is not incorrect to say that it is because of the pure love of the devotees that they exhibit those qualities in the first place. So if the purport seems to be a little bit hard to understand, especially the last sentence, this is why. I'll read it again. The Lord is satisfied by development of the transcendental qualities of the living entity and not by artificial performance of sacrifices and mystic yoga. In other words, unless one is fully qualified to become a pure devotee, one cannot expect to be liberated from material entanglement. It seems as if the qualities themselves are what satisfy the Lord, but it's also explained in the beginning of the purport that these qualities cannot develop unless one becomes a pure devotee of the Lord. So they go together. It's like you cannot chant the holy name of the Lord, Shuddhanam, pure nam, unless you're free from offenses, but it's by chanting the name of the Lord that you become free from offenses. It's the same thing. So bhakti creates itself, or bhakti nourishes itself. Rupa Goswami says it's kind of like the ocean. The water is drawn from the ocean into a cloud by the sun and then redistributed to the ocean in the form of rain. So this is the idea with bhakti. All right, so as far as commentators go, only Jiva Goswami has briefly commented on this verse. It's surprising. Usually Sridhar Swami comments on every single verse, but neither he nor Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comment here. But Jiva Goswami says, Tadevam Shri Bhagavata Adesha Trayam Jatam Indrena Pritihi Siddhanugamanam Yatra Svikarascheti. Oh, I don't know about this. Tadeva Trayamapi Svichakareti Sa Itamiti. Yeah, it looks like this is actually the purport to some other verse. Anyway. All right, well, let's go on to the next verse because I'm supposed to start with 17 today. Yeah, we can just chant this verse. Otherwise, in the interest of time, I'm going to move pretty quick. Maitreya uvacha sa ittam loka guruna vishvaksenena vishvajita. Okay. Anushasita de adesham shirasa jagrehe harehe. Maitreya uvacha. Maitreya said, Saha, he, Ittam, thus, Loka Guruna, by the Supreme Master of all people, Vishvaksenena, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishvajita, the conqueror of the world, Maharaja Prithu, Anushasitaha, being ordered, Adesham, instructions, Shirasa, on the head, Jagrihe, accepted, Harehe, of the personality of Godhead. The great saint Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, in this way Maharaj Prithu, the conqueror of the entire world, accepted the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead on his head. Please repeat. The great saint Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, in this way Maharaj Prithu, the conqueror of the entire world, accepted the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead on his head. There's a purport here by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One should accept the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by bowing down at the lotus feet of the Lord. This means that anything spoken by the Personality of Godhead should be taken as it is, with great care and attention, and with great respect. It is not our business to amend the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or make additions or alterations, as it has become a custom for many so-called scholars and swamis who comment on the words of Bhagavad Gita. Here the practical example of how to accept the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is shown by Prithu Maharaj. This is the way to receive knowledge through the Parampara system. And in fact, this is the commentary of Jiva Goswami, which we tried to read a moment ago, and I will revisit now. He says, the Lord gave 3 instructions. He should be pleased with Indra. Siddhas would agree to come to his house. He should accept blessings. Prithu accepted the 3 instructions. The last 2 he accepted in a special way according to his liking. The first is expressed in the next verse. We've discussed already the specific duty of a king is to protect the citizens, and Maharaj Prithu was empowered by the Lord specifically for that purpose and to set that example. For whom? For all of us, but especially for leaders. The leaders should take note of this. Their first business is to protect the people. How do you protect people? How about dharmo rakshita rakshita? Dharma rakshati, rakshitaha. This is, Manu says. We are protected by dharma when we perform dharma. Now, the king cannot invent dharma, neither can a siddha or a charana or a demigod or anyone other than Vishnu. And in fact, even Vishnu doesn't really create dharma in the sense that it's eternally existing. But he says he creates the four divisions from time to time. Whenever there's a material creation, he acts accordingly. But the king's business is to make sure that all of his citizens are performing their respective dharmas. It's not that everybody has to perform the same dharma, because everybody has their own dharma, but everybody has to do dharma only. What happens if you don't do dharma? Then what do you do by default? Adharma. It's also called vidharma. This is described in 7th Canto, Chapter 15, texts 12 through 14, or 15 if I'm not mistaken. 5 ways that we can deviate from this if we're creative. And Americans are very creative, so Americans in particular have to watch out for this. Please don't take offense. When I'm in Tamil Nadu, I make fun of the Tamils, and because, anyway, anywhere I go, I make fun of the local population also. It's not just you. But Prabhupada did say that the American disease is that we have to create new things all the time. We always have to change things. Creation, in fact, is the primary manifestation of the mode of passion. Not only creation, change. Change in general is symptomatic of the presence of passion. Because in this world, that's what makes things go. Anybody know this verse? Sthitir vaikunta vijayaha poshanam tadanugraha. What's the rest of it? 2nd Canto, Chapter 10 again. Very important chapter. Chapter 10 of the 2nd Canto. What is that? Even now I'm forgetting. Anyway, the point is made there that the impetus for activities in this world is fruit of desires, fruit of work. So passion, change means passion. And therefore, it's when people want to change anything all the time, or change everything all the time, that indicates that they're passionate people. So this is something to take note of, but Jiva Goswami says here that he accepted all these 3 instructions from the Supreme Lord. The king's duty is to protect the prajas, and the prajas can only be protected if they perform their dharma, because if you don't perform your dharma, you're going to be performing one of 5 kinds of adharma, or vidharma, or vikarma, or papa. These are all synonymous terms. But you can choose your terms, but you cannot choose what to do. It's often been said of Vedic literature in general that it gives us infinite options what to believe, but no options about what to do. Because we're servants. The servant has to do as he's told. Kinkara, we were discussing yesterday. The word in Sanskrit for servant, Ainanda Tanuja Kinkara, right? The Mahaprabhu considers himself a servant of Nanda Tanuja, the one who has been born of Nanda Maharaj. Servant means Kim Kadishyama. What shall I do, sir? Order me. So Kinkara. You have to do, what am I to do? This is what a servant's only concern is. What's my next instruction? So, and this is why the Prithu Maharaj has pleased the Lord, because he's following the instructions that he's been given very submissively. Not only been the instructions given by the Lord himself, but also we've described in the previous verses the instructions that are given by his predecessors and his acharyas and his gurus of all sorts. This is why he became great, and this is why he was able to please the Lord. So it seems to follow that when Srila Prabhupada writes in his own purport that one should become qualified to render devotional service, it seems that this is a very important component of that. obedience. We have to become obedient. Disciple means discipline, means we have to follow what we're instructed. At least we have to try. This is the point. We described already that we may not always be able to follow because we're imperfect, but if someone cannot follow and humbly tries, even if he fails, it's okay. Because every activity is covered by some sort of flaw. Krishna acknowledges in Bhagavad Gita. But if a person instead doesn't want to admit his or her prescribed duty and instead tries to denigrate that obligation or reinterpret that obligation or just outright neglect that obligation, then that is exactly what Srila Prabhupada is talking about in his purport when he says, anything spoken by the personality of Godhead should be taken as it is, with great care and attention and with great respect. It is not our business to amend the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or the founder Acharya, for that matter, or make additions or alterations as it has become a custom, etc., etc. So, we have serious business to do, and as long as we're trying, then we will be redeemed eventually. Because that is bhakti, actually. To accept the orders of the spiritual master and humbly attempt to follow those instructions, it is a kind of bhakti, even if it's an immature bhakti. But if a person instead tries to twist and twangle things in such a way that he looks good and the person giving the instruction or the instruction itself looks bad, then that's not very good. And it doesn't lead to an auspicious destination because, as we've described, one's only alternative to dharma is adharma. Anybody know those verses in chapter 15 of the 7th canto? Adharma, vidharma, paradharmascha. There's 5 kinds. There's to do sinful activity. That's anything that's not dharma. That's one kind of vidharma. And to do someone else's dharma is another thing. Dharma abhas, something that looks like dharma, but it's not really dharma. Chala dharma, which is outright cheating without any intention of following anything, just to look like you're a dharmic person. Sometimes they're called dharma dwajis also. So these are, and what is the other one? I don't remember just offhand, but these are the 5 kinds of adharma that are mentioned. So we have to. The conclusion of that passage of the Bhagavatam is that we have to avoid these things because they're all adharma, and there's no such thing as vikarma yoga, as we said for the 3rd time since I've been in Texas. All right. Got some technical problems here. One moment, your patience is appreciated. All right, text 18. Sprishantam padayo premna vriditam svena karmana shatakratum parishwajya vidvesham visasarjaham. As King Indra was standing by, he became ashamed of his own activities and fell down before King Prithu to touch his lotus feet. The king of the gods touching the feet of a mortal politician. That's something pretty extraordinary. Equally extraordinary is the fact that the leader of the demigods is himself acting worse than a human being by stealing a horse. But Prithu Maharaj immediately embraced him in great ecstasy and gave up all envy against him for his having stolen the horse meant for the sacrifice. Purport. There are many cases in which a person becomes an offender to the lotus feet of a Vaishnava and later becomes repentant. Here also we find that although the king of heaven, Indra, was so powerful that he accompanied Lord Vishnu, he felt himself a great offender for stealing Prithu Maharaj's horse that was meant for sacrifice. An offender at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava is never excused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are many instances illustrating this fact. Ambarish Maharaj, etc., etc. We know that story. So, Indra decided to fall down at the lotus feet of King Prithu, but the king was so magnanimous of Vaishnava that he did not want Maharaj Indra to fall down at his feet. Instead, King Prithu immediately picked him up and embraced him, and both of them forgot all the past incidents. Would that we could be so forgiving. Both King Indra and Maharaj Prithu were envious and angry with each other. Both King Indra and Maharaj Prithu were envious and angry with each other. That's what it says. Not what it says, what he says. Who says? No, Krishna says. That's why we should never amend his words. In New York City in June of 1976, a New York Times religion reporter came to interview Srila Prabhupada. And she was very skeptical. And Rameshwar Swami at that time was traveling with Srila Prabhupada, and he could understand her mood, and so he was trying to prep her somewhat and, just instill in her any idea of respect for the founder Acharya of ISKCON as a great saintly person. However, he could see that she wasn't really taking him very seriously. I don't know why she worked as a religion editor, but that's another question. Anyway, when she came in to see Srila Prabhupada, the first thing she asked him was, "How do you know what to write in your books?" And Srila Prabhupada immediately answered, "Krishna tells me." And all the devotees were like, and Rameshwar Swami especially was so nervous because he had just talked to this woman. He couldn't understand. She's not going to digest this at all. And so he interjected and he tried to explain that Paramatma is within the hearts of all living beings, and when one is sincere, one gets intelligence from Paramatma, and Paramatma will direct his activities and his words, and he can choose the words on. And Prabhupada wouldn't have any of this. Rameshwar Prabhu now told me personally several months back that this story. Prabhupada slammed his hand down on the desk, hard. And he said, "No!" And everybody, the whole room was galvanized in shock. And Prabhupada said, "It's not like that." He said, "Krishna personally is standing next to me and dictating to me what to write." At that time, Rameshwar reports, the entire room became terribly grave. Everyone became completely, just the whole atmosphere just immediately became intense gravity. And this woman from that point on was extremely respectful to Srila Prabhupada. Can you imagine? He was, Rameshwar, of course, it was at his expense that Prabhupada said that. He was completely, he just wanted to find a hole in the corner to just try to crawl into. But what an event! What a revelation! So this is why we have to be very careful, and we don't know who we're dealing with, and we don't know where these instructions are coming from, and there's a lot of things we don't know. This is the gist of it. So, anyway, here Prabhupada says this. Maharaj Prithu and King Indra were both envious and angry with each other. It can somehow happen in this material world. Fact is stranger than fiction. But they were both Vaishnavas, servants of Lord Vishnu, and it was their duty to adjust the cause of their envy. This is also a first-class example of cooperative behavior between them. This is a famous purport for this reason, how devotees can get along. In the present days, however, because people are not Vaishnavas, they fight perpetually among one another and are vanquished without finishing the mission of human life. It's kind of like in ISKCON we have a tendency, if there's a philosophical disagreement or a disagreement that's actually political but masquerading as an ideological disagreement, then instead of solving that through philosophical means, which is the ideal that we're taught, we solve it through political means, usually underhanded means, which proves that it's actually a political problem in the first place, correct? Otherwise, why have such a solution? So, this is not the first-class example of cooperative behavior between Vaishnavas, but Prabhupada writes here, in the present days, however, because people are not Vaishnavas, they fight perpetually among one another for 20 years or more. Some issues are going on. And they're vanquished without finishing the mission of human life because of offenses. Now, in Chaitanya Bhagavata, Madhya Khanda, chapter, I believe it's 13, text. Anyway, you'll have to get it from me later. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments with regard to the fact that Jagai Madhai were offenders. He says that someone who blasphemes Vaishnavas cannot have any good future, ever. And this is, of course, in the Bhagavatam, 1st canto and 10th canto and elsewhere. But he goes on to say that to point out genuine flaws that are true in persons who are non-devotionally interested, but who present their ideas as bona fide devotional service, that is not blasphemy. It sounds like something Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say. Something to that effect. Anyway, you can see me later if you want that reference. But the point is that if someone is cheating, and it's true that the person is in fact cheating, and you say that he's cheating, or you say that it is cheating rather, that's not blasphemy. Although it's not a good idea to mention names in these cases. Prabhupada never liked that so much, even though he himself sometimes did it as well. All right, so there's a great need to propagate the Krishna consciousness movement in the world, so that even though people sometimes become angry and malicious toward one another because of their being Krishna conscious, such rivalry, competition, and envy can be adjusted without difficulty. And how is it adjusted? What did Prabhupada say on many, many occasions? You know, in the old days especially, it used to be in the GBC meetings would always turn into just really nasty fights. Because everybody was only 20. Now we know better that we can go behind people's backs and do all of our things like that. But, very civil and happy amongst one another when we're to the face, and then, the knife in the back. But Srila Prabhupada said in those cases that if you can't get along and you can't resolve your problems, and you somehow just come together and do what? Sankirtana. Yes, Sankirtan. So that's kind of implied here in the end of the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Then, because of being Krishna conscious in that way at least, such rivalry, competition, and envy can be adjusted without difficulty, yes. So more kirtan is always a good idea than less kirtan. Text 19. Bhagavan atavishvatma prituna upahritarhanaham samujjanaya sorry, it's hard for me to see. Samujjanaya bhaktya Grihita charanam bujaha. When you get old, you need mota type. That means fat type. In Hindi, they say they have mota type. All right. King Prithu abundantly worshipped the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was so merciful to him. While worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord, Prithu Maharaj gradually increased his ecstasy in devotional service. Abundantly worshipped the Lord, who was so merciful to him. Purport: when various ecstasies appear in the body of a devotee, it is to be understood that his devotional service has become perfect. I mean, this is, of course, genuine ecstasy, not show bottle sahajiyasm. There are many types of transcendental ecstasies in the forms of crying, laughing, perspiring, falling down, and crying like a madman. All these symptoms are sometimes visible in the body of a devotee. I just came from Atlanta, and we were in the very room where it happened. Sananda Prabhu, you were there? Apurva, you? It's 1975. The Paramakaruna ecstasy that Prabhupada went into in Atlanta. So, yeah, I mean, he just spoke a few lines. Shruta Kirti tells the whole backstory because he was traveling with Srila Prabhupada. In Caracas, Venezuela, Prabhupada was overwhelmed to see that in this far corner of the earth, so remote from Vrindavan or Mayapur, all these people happily chanting Haribol, Nitai Gaur. And Prabhupada was stunned to see the result of his own work. Not that he was proud, but he was astonished to see that even he was an agent of the Lord's mercy, a conduit, so to speak, of the Lord's compassion on these people. And Prabhupada was so stunned to see that Krishna consciousness not only could spread all over the world, but did spread all over the world. And we can assume that Prabhupada was also overwhelmed at the undeniable recognition that he was the agent for that transformation in so many mlechas and yavanas worldwide. He just went into ecstasy in front of Gaur-Nitai, and tears were shooting from his eyes as if from a syringe. Shruta Kirti said, I was 6 feet away from Prabhupada and still got wet with tears from his eyes. That doesn't happen in this world, does it? It doesn't happen. This is a transcendental manifestation coming from a personality who is directly hearing from Krishna what to write. And then, as if that weren't enough, they went to the United States. I think maybe they went to Florida first, or maybe they went to Atlanta first, I don't remember. But when they came to Atlanta again, Srila Prabhupada came in the temple, and in those days there was only Gaur-Nitai. There's still in the center Gaur-Nitai standing there, resplendently, just radiating abundant compassion on the city of Atlanta, especially lately, in the form of Prabhupada's books. And Srila Prabhupada tried to sing this song, Paramakaruna Pahundui Nitai Gaur Chandra. Paramakaruna, supremely merciful, these two lords, Nitai and Gaura Chandra. We all know the song. And when Prabhupada was trying to explain it, he just broke down again in the same way. He just went into ecstasy and could not finish. So this is the transcendental ecstatic symptoms that Prabhupada is mentioning here. They're sometimes visible, not always, sometimes, because a real devotee doesn't want to exhibit, doesn't want to make a big show or draw attention to himself. But sometimes Prabhupada just could not keep it in. And that's not something we can even imagine. Just like we can't imagine absolute, unqualified, infinite humility, we cannot understand this love that Prabhupada had for Gaur-Nitai, except by analyzing what he did, not only for us, but for the whole world. So Ashta Sattvika Vikara, it's called, 8 kinds of changes. They're never to be imitated, but when a devotee actually becomes perfect, the symptoms are visible on his body. The Lord is Bhakta Vatsal, which means that he is inclined toward his pure devotee or Bhakta. Therefore, the transcendental, ecstatic, transaction between the Supreme Lord and his devotee is never like the activities of this material world. Here, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that samudjihanaya bhaktya means it was by dint of bhakti which increased at every moment. That's another thing that's hard for us to imagine. Bhakti that increases at every moment. Okay, so the next verse. Prasthanabhimukopyenam anugraha vilambitaha pashyan padmapala shaksho napratasthe suhritsatam. The Lord was just about to leave, but because he was so greatly inclined toward the behavior of King Prithu, he did not depart. Seeing the behavior of Maharaj Prithu with his lotus eyes, he was detained because he is always the well-wisher of his devotees. Just like when the Lord was trying to depart for Dwarka from Hastinapura, he couldn't leave. He had to stay a little longer because he was implored by his devotees. Kunti Devi, Yudhishthir Maharaj, all of them. Purport. Hear the words Suhrit Satam. Have we heard these words before? Here the words Suhrit Satam are very significant. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always very inclined towards his devotee and is always thinking of the devotee's well-being. This is not partiality. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord is equal to everyone. Samoham sarvabhuteshu. But to one who particularly engages in his service, he's very much inclined. In another place, the Lord says that a devotee always exists in his heart, and he also exists in the heart of the devotee. The special inclination of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his pure devotee is not a natural, nor is it partiality. For example, sometimes a father has several children, but he has special affection for one child who is very much inclined toward him. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Those who constantly engage in the devotional service of the Lord in love and affection are directly in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sitting as the Supersoul in everyone's heart. The Lord is not far away from the devotee. He's always in everyone's heart, but only the devotee can realize the Lord's presence. And thus he's directly connected, and he takes instruction from the Lord at every moment. Therefore, there's no chance of a devotee's being in error, nor is there any partiality on the part of the Lord or his pure devotees. Sa'adirajo rajitanjalir harim vilokitum nasakad ashrulochanaha dakinchino vacha sabashpa viklavo hridyopa guhyamam adhad avasthitaham. The original King Maharaj Prithu, his eyes full of tears and his voice faltering and choked up, could neither see the Lord very distinctly, nor speak to address the Lord in any way. He simply embraced the Lord within his heart and remained standing in that way with folded hands. Have we seen this behavior before? In others? In the Bhagavatam? So many times it happens. So many times. Just like Dhruva also, he couldn't speak. He couldn't say anything. That's how intense the Lord is. What does Rupa Goswami, what does intense mean? Rupa Goswami says that he's Chidghana Sukha Swarupa. He's the very embodiment of intensified bliss, spiritual bliss. And he says this in particular about the holy name. Is that how we feel when we chant the holy name? Just as Krishna is addressed in Brahma Samhita as Adi Purusha, this is the purport, the original personality, so King Prithu, being an empowered incarnation of the Lord, is referred to in this verse as Adi Rajaha, the original or ideal king. That's why it's so important that he performed his dharma. And that's why it's pleased the Lord so much that he did so, because it's what the Lord wanted. We know this. It's it's an open secret, we can say. Krishna says in so many places, the reason I come here is dharma samstapana, as well as sadhu paritrana. This is the Lord's interest. He has desires. He's a person. There's certain things he wants and certain things he doesn't want. And we have to surrender to what he wants and avoid what he doesn't want. So, he was an ideal king. He was a great devotee and at the same time a great hero who conquered over all undesirable elements in his kingdom. He was so powerful that he was equal in fighting to Indra, the king of heaven. He gave protection to his citizens, keeping them engaged in pious activities. Is this what we just explained? Yes. And devotion to the Lord. He did not collect a single cent of taxes from the citizens without being able to give them protection from all calamities. The greatest calamity of life is to become godless and therefore sinful. If the state head or king allows the citizens to become sinful by indulging in illicit sex life, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling, then the king is responsible. And he has to suffer the resultant sequence of reactions for the sinful lives of the citizens, because he levies taxes on them unnecessarily, especially in India. Oh my God. A few years ago, when they outlawed the rupee, the higher denomination rupee notes, that's a whole other thing, but they raided the house of the chief minister in Hyderabad, and they found that he had an entire room full of brand new 2,000 rupee notes, which were not yet released. So this is the level of cheating that we're dealing with. And Indian government officials as well. It's all the way from Indra to the Indragopa, it seems sometimes. But it's, at least in India, it's all the way from the prime minister to the Indragopa. Okay, so these are the principles for a ruling power. And because Maharaj Prithu observed all the principles of a ruling chief, he is referred to here as Adi Raja. Even a responsible king like Maharaj Prithu can become a pure devotee of the first order. We can distinctly see from King Prithu's behavior how he became ecstatic, both externally and internally, in pure devotional service. Just today, we have seen in the newspapers of Bombay that the government is going to repeal its prohibition laws. This is not back in the 1970s. Ever since Gandhi's non-cooperation movement, Bombay has been kept dry and has not allowed its citizens to drink. But unfortunately, the citizens are so clever that they have increased illicit distillation of liquor, and although not being sold publicly in shops, where is it sold? Well, now it is, actually. It's in shops, you know. Sarkari Teka Deshi Sharab. You see so many little shops, even in Vrindavan, I have to say. Once in a while you come across, there's a body of, there's an empty bottle of, some, illicit thing. Although not being sold publicly in shops, liquor is being sold in public lavatories and similar abnormal places. Unable to check such illicit smuggling, the government has decided to manufacture the liquor at cheaper prices so that people can have their supply of intoxication directly from the government instead of purchasing it in public lavatories. At least they don't die. When I was in Florida, or was it Florida? Maybe it was in Atlanta, I don't remember. But Billboard said, "What else is in your drugs?" And then it lists all the possibilities: fentanyl, or rat poison, or arsenic, or people who are purchasing these illicit drugs on the street. It kills them. Even the police officer touches an envelope, it kills him. This stuff is so potent because China's importing this. They're not settled with high grade synthetic fentanyl anymore. Now they've just got to go straight to poison, or increase the dosage so much that you immediately overdose upon touching it. Bringing the drugs through Mexico with the tacit permission of the authorities. This is what's happening, so that they can soften us up for the kill. Anyway, this is back in the 1970s. Prabhupada is talking like this. The real problem is that the government failed to check the desire for these things by endorsing, encouraging, propagating even Krishna consciousness. This is the real problem. Because once people become godless, then there's nothing you can do with them, because they're godless. They don't accept any authority. They don't recognize anything, dharmic or non-dharmic. They don't care. So the government has this obligation, and once the government neglects that obligation, very difficult. We were having a discussion yesterday about Varnashram Dharma. Very difficult thing. Very, very difficult. You cannot, how are you going to possibly induce anyone to accept the rules of Manusmriti, for example? Nearly impossible. That's why I said a moment ago, we can't conceive of absolute humility. But the real point is this, that we should be propagating God consciousness, and the government should be doing this. Secular government doesn't have to mean atheistic government. Prabhupada says you can endorse universal principles of religion: cleanliness, austerity, mercy, truthfulness. These things in every religion is teaching, even if they don't follow, but they're teaching it. And by endorsing these principles, then people can become a little bit more pious and receptive to Krishna consciousness. Okay, we are out of time, but we have one more verse, and I will just quickly go through that. Atavam marijya ashru kala vilokayan atripta driggocharam aha purusham padas prashantam kshitim angsha unnate vinyasta hastagram urangad vidvishaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead stood with his lotus feet almost touching the ground, while he rested the front of his hand on the raised shoulder of Garuda, the enemy of snakes. Maharaj Prithu, wiping the tears from his eyes, tried to look upon the Lord, but it appeared that the king was not fully satisfied by looking at him. Thus the king offered the following prayers. And stay tuned for that, because there's a lot of nectar coming up. Purport: the significant point in this verse is that the Lord was standing above the ground, almost touching it. The residents of upper planetary systems, beginning from Brahmaloka down to Swargaloka, are so advanced in spiritual life that when they come to visit this or similar other lower planetary systems, they keep their weightlessness. This means that they can stand without touching the ground. Lord Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but because he lives in one of the planetary systems within this universe, he sometimes plays as if one of the demigods of this universe. Like Indra. Does Vishnu ever become Indra? Yes, he does. That's right. Sometimes he does. A lot of things about Vishnu we don't understand. So, when he first appeared before Maharaj Prithu, he was not touching the ground, but when he was fully satisfied with the behavior and character of Maharaj Prithu, he immediately acted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, from Vaikuntha. Out of affection for Prithu Maharaj, he touched the earth, but he rested the front of his hand on the raised shoulder of Garuda, his carrier, as if to prevent himself from falling down, since the Lord is not accustomed to stand on the earthly ground. And yet that same Lord, as Krishna, he left his footprints all over the ground of Vrindavan, Vrajatam. Beautiful verse by Bilvamangala Thakur tells us this. What does he say? Maninu Puravachalam Vande Tacharanam Vibhoho Lalitani Yadiyani Lakshmani Vrajavithishu. This Lord, whose feet are decorated with little jingling bracelets of gold or silver, has decorated all the little footpaths of Vrindavan with the marks of his lotus feet. And I therefore bow down to those lotus feet, he says. So this is the Lord. And in fact, he also goes on to say, Bilvamangala Thakur, that not only is the Lord's lotus feet decorated with so many costly jewels and sandalwood pulp and tulsi leaves and silver ornaments and gold ornaments, but the Lord's lotus feet are, when he comes to Vrindavan and plays the part of a cowherd boy, his lotus feet, which are venerated by all the Upanishads and praised by sages and worshipped by demigods with their crowns touching those feet, those same lotus feet are decorated in Vrajatam with the unique distinction of the decoration of squishy cow dung. Okay, so this is the Lord's mercy, that he displays these wonderful pastimes. And even in worldly pastimes, here Maharaj Prithu seems to be a worldly king, but actually it's not so. He's a pure devotee, and he has his love of Godhead going on, but it's a little bit undercover, maybe. But sometimes his ecstasy comes out, as we're seeing here. So the Lord touched the earth, but he rested the front of his hand on shoulder as if to prevent himself from falling down. These are all the symptoms of his great affection for Prithu Maharaj. Perceiving his fortunate position, Prithu Maharaj could not fully look upon the Lord due to ecstasy. But still, in a faltering voice, he began to offer prayers. And we can hardly wait for those prayers. So please stay tuned. Tomorrow we can hear more. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Anybody have any questions or any comments? Yes.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful class. There's one point which struck me, that Indra and Maharaj Prathu has anger and envy among them, and yet they forgot that anger and envy, and they embraced each other. So the reason I felt that they are highly elevated Vaishnava, but how on this platform, as we are presently, how we can deal with our envy and anger to each other and embrace each other with their...
How can we ourselves be free of envy and anger and have mutual self? Well, this is answered by Prahlad Maharaj. He would know. He had to deal with a lot of anger and envy, is it not? So he says, his prayer is that the entire universe becomes auspicious. But if you pray for the welfare of the entire universe, then that means you want to empower the demons as well, doesn't it? Therefore, he says, Khala prasidatam. May they not, may they be pacified. May they no longer be demons, in other words. How is that so? Mito, was that... the second line of the verse, anybody know? Dhyayantu Bhudani Shivam Mithodhiya. May they think only good thoughts about each other. This is what we have to practice also. Manascha Bhadram How can a demon think good thoughts about anyone else? They're only thinking how to exploit everyone. And so are we if we're demons. But manashta bhadram bhajatar hokshaje. This is the point. By worshiping at hokshaja, by devotional service, their minds will become auspicious. And furthermore, Prahlad Maharaj, identifying himself as a demon, he says, Aveshitam no matirapiya haituki. May even our minds become auspicious in this way. Because he's thinking I'm a demon also, but even my mind can also. And that means that our minds can also become auspicious. Our mind becoming auspicious means our heart becoming auspicious. And our heart becomes auspicious when it's full of Krishna. So stuff your heart jam-packed full of Krishna. And the best way to do that is by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. And Prabhupada's books. You fill your heart with these two things, you'll be fine. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Prabhu.
Yeah, leave no space. Yes, Mataji.
Hi Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much. Prabhu, in the beginning when you were talking about passion, like passion is used for changing, we have so much of passion that we tend to change. But passion is also needed to create temples and so many other things.
That's right.
So passion can be used for Krishna and
yes,
to satisfy our senses or Krishna's senses, lust or love, it's up to. So how do we make sure, like how do we check ourselves whether we are using our passion for Krishna or for our sense gratification? In this case, sense gratification is changing things, as Prabhupada says.
Yes. Yeah, so this is a very good point. Srila Prabhupada regularly says throughout his books and his purports, one should engage in devotional service as if in the mode of passion. As if in the mode of passion. But not in the mode of passion. There's a difference between, well, let us say, what is the essence of passion in this world? The most passionate thing that you can imagine in this world, what is it? The essence of passion, what is it in material life? The sex, right? Therefore, Rupa Goswami uses this word to describe the very highest devotees, Kamanuga Bhaktas. Kamanuga. Why, how can we use the word kama? It is the worst thing. This is the inconceivability of trying to fit an elephant onto a small plate. You cannot, there are no words to describe the spiritual experience of the highest devotees of the Lord. But because for that very reason, we have to use the best words that will do, and only this word will do, kama. So the gopis also seem to be very passionate. What is he, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, under the sway of amorous, passionate love, if I'm not mistaken. So that is the ideal, actually. But we have to be very careful not to prematurely assume that we're already there, because we aren't. And we prove that regularly, and despite proving it regularly, we don't seem to learn. Therefore, there's an objective way of dealing with this problem, and that is sadhu shastra guru vakku chite te koryaikyu. Whatever is in your heart, what you passionately desire within your heart, that should be the words of the spiritual master, bona fide spiritual master, the whole parampara of the acharyas who precede him, and ultimately the shastra itself, from which their authority all derives. If we always maintain our activities within the grammatical framework of those instructions, then we will not be in the mode of passion. But in order to follow those instructions, we have to know those instructions. And in order to know those instructions, we have to hear those instructions. And how often do we have to hear those instructions? Daily at least. But vastavma, nityam bhagavata sevaya means always. Now we have these little red boxes somebody invented, right? And you can put in your SD card and hear all Prabhupada's lectures. So one of my godbrothers, he said, one year at Gaur Purnima, I just decided I'm just gonna hear this stuff 24/7 and see what happens. And he said it was like night and day, his life before making that decision and his life after making that decision. if you're hearing this, he said, if I'm not doing something that requires me to concentrate, 100% focus, then I'm hearing these lectures and kirtans of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. And what is the result of that? You instantly have gained maybe 3 to 5 hours of association with Srila Prabhupada every day. How can you possibly remain in Maya if you're determined to do that? The problem is that we're not determined to do that because we're not closely associated with sadhus whose faith is deeper than ours to the extent that they are determined to do like that. This is the problem. Therefore we say sadhu sangha, sarva shastra koi, lava matra sadhu sangha, sarva siddhi hoy. You find the sadhus who are going to inspire you to take such drastic measures. To get out of this world requires drastic measures. Krishna calls it in Bhagavad Gita, not drastic measures, but vyavasayatmika buddhi. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur confirms this means following the orders of the spiritual master. And Srila Prabhupada has told us this was his entire inspiration for founding this society. So that's a long answer to a short question. I hope it's helpful.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare
Yeah.
Krishna.
Anything else? I can't see very well. But I think we're done. So thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.